So I've had a weird cold thing lately, so my December wrap-up was delayed, and I thought we could try a new location for this. I'm in my bedroom where the magic happens. And by magic, I mean book reading before I go to bed. So yeah, let's get into this December wrap-up. This was a really good month for book reading. I'm now ahead of schedule for my plans for 2024, and I just want to share what I read. So let's get right into it. First thing I finished this month was a huge surprise, Fall of Giants by Ken Follett. I talked about it in my year-end wrap-up. This is number 3 in my top books of the year. It's magnificent. It does such an amazing job of covering the early 1900s leading up to World War I and a few years after World War I. It follows a bunch of different people. You've got like a Welsh family, an English lord, a German aristocrat, 2 Russian brothers, and so you witness all the magnificent parts of history from that time. It's really, really good. I highly recommend it. As a bit of a palate cleanser and a refresher, I reread the first book in this, Swords and Deviltry. It's the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser works. The thing about that is the first story, which covers Fafhrd's origin, is incredibly boring. Like, I almost recommend you skip it. It's called The Snow Women. It is such a drag, like, and it really doesn't have much to do with the rest of the stories. The Grey Mouser's origin story is pretty cool, but honestly, the reason why you get this is for Ilmet and Lonkmar. That story is an absolute banger. Fritz Leiber does such a good job in Ilmet and Lonkmar of really showing you what Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser are all about. They're there for a good time. It's interesting, and it just shows how amazing they could be too. Like, it's such a good story and such a great introduction to Lonkmar itself. So I highly recommend it. The first story, Grey Mouser's origin story, that one's good. And then Ilmet and Lonkmar is totally worth reading them for. Or just skipping to that one, doesn't really matter. This next book was on my top books of the year, Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. Flowers for Algernon is a masterpiece. I understand why it has all the critical acclaim that it does now. Like I said in my end of year review, I was mad that every time I brought it up to someone, they're like, oh, I read that in school. Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm like, why didn't I get to read this in school? I'm just glad I finally got around to reading it. It's well worth it. Now let's completely veer off in a direction no one saw coming. I read Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. This book is fantastic. Frederick Douglass is just such a master with his words, and to read such a harrowing journey up until he freed himself, it's absolutely amazing. Just, it gets you into exactly what slavery was like in a way that you're not going to get in any other medium. It's absolutely amazing. It's so wonderfully written. I think that this sets the standard for narrative memoirs. I highly recommend it. I think one of the interesting things about it is just how much I learned about Frederick Douglass. I knew that he was an abolitionist and he helped in the movement, but I didn't realize like what his life was like before that. I had no idea he worked in like shipyards and stuff like that. Like, also, I always forget that Maryland was part of the South. It's just wild to think about, but yep, they had a lot of slaves. Moving on, but somehow still interacting with slavery, we have Lord of a Shattered Land by Howard Andrew Jones. This book is really good. Like, this is channeling like old school Robert E. Howard. I mean, the introduction, it sounds like a perfect blending of Homer and Robert E. Howard. It's so incredibly epic. This book took me a long time to finish, way longer than it should have. I don't know what it was. I think it's that it's a collection of short stories that have like a narrative that kind of builds together. But the problem is you never really get invested in any side characters. He's constantly hopping around. So it was really hard to get the ball rolling. Eventually in like a novel, you kind of get acclimated to everything that's going on, acclimated to the characters, and then you just get to push forward and see where it ends. And with this, it just felt like it just kept stumbling along and stumbling along. Some of the adventures were better than others, and since it's basically like a combining of a bunch of short stories, it just kind of makes it hard to really gain momentum. The main character, Hanavar, is awesome. I mean, we're talking about a dude past his prime that was like a hero and a general and like the leader of this amazing country that was destroyed by their enemies, and his whole thing is he's trying to gather back all the people that were lost and captured and the few people left from his nation. And he's awesome. Like, he's in like his 50s, I think, in here. So you've got a guy, he's got like a bad knee, he's tired, but you know, he's just pushing as hard as he can because he has people that are depending on him and he's not going to give up. It's really good. There's a couple of times I got choked up. Like, it was some overwhelming heroic stuff. I really liked it. But like I said, it was just a pacing thing. So, you know, it's not like an overwhelming recommend, but if you like that style and you're interested interested in some swords and sandals style swords and sorcery, then you'll really enjoy it. And now we get into my cheating on my 2024 project of reading everything written by Glen Cook. I plan on doing in-depth dives for each series when I get to them. So like when I finish everything in the Dread Empire, I'm going to give you a big breakdown on all of them. But for now, I'm going to give just brief reviews on the stuff I read early. I didn't have much to do at the end of December, so I thought, why not? Let's start 2024's project early. First thing I read was The Best of Glen Cook. And this is just a collection of his short stories, and man, they're fantastic. The really great thing about this is at the beginning of each short story, we got like these little paragraphs written by Glen Cook, little introductions where he kind of talks about the story or where it came from and stuff like that. Man, you find out some really awesome stuff. Let's start with the negatives. There are 2 Black Company stories in here. They are terrible. Like, they honestly are just like awful. I feel really bad even saying that, but it feels like he lost the voice of Croker in these because they kind of take place before the Black Company heads south. You know what that means? Good. If you don't worry about it till you get there. But anyways, it's like he lost Croker's voice, and the dialogue is just weird. Like, it uses way too many modern colloquialisms. I just feel like they're not worth reading. So skip those. That's Shaggy Dog Bridge and the Bone Eaters and Chasing Midnight. It's like Black Company adjacent is not good. But let's get into the good. Everything else in here is an absolute banger. There's only one thing I didn't read, and it has to do with the Garrett P.I. stories because it takes place way toward the end of the Garrett P.I. novels, and I don't want to spoil anything for myself. So that's the one thing I didn't read in here. Everything else, I mean, holy crap. The ones that really stand out are Ghost Stalk and Call for the Dead. Those are pirate stories. There's a crazy like surprise ending for Ghost Stalk, and man, it's really, really cool. He's got multiple nautical short stories in here. You can tell this man was in the Navy. They're very, very good. And what was really great about this was I got an introduction to his science fiction. Man, Glen Cook can write some science fiction. And fun little fact, in this, he talks about The Dragon Never Sleeps, and he says that's his best work. I think I've mentioned that before, but I just thought I should mention it again. I plan on reading that, hopefully with some friends. It'll be really good. He also has Severed Heads in here, which he said is his best-selling short fiction. He said he made more on that than he did on like most of his novels. It's part of the Dread Empire, like it takes place in the setting, but you don't really need it for the stories. But man, it's pretty good. It starts out real slow. I was like, man, I'm not really feeling this. But by the end, I was just fully invested. It's very good. So yeah, anyone who likes Glen Cook should definitely get this. Just don't read the Black Company stuff. You'll be sad. This last one. All right. So not only do I get to flex a little, I also get to just talk about Cruel Wind, A Chronicle of the Dread Empire. Now what's fancy about this one, your boy managed to get the limited edition. Not only is it a limited edition, it is signed by Glen Cook and Jeff Vandermeer. Yeah, Jeff Vandermeer wrote the introduction. I think I've talked about that before, but man, I found this for a steal. I don't know where all you other Glen Cook enjoyers were on eBay, but man, y'all are sleeping on this one. This book, A Cruel Wind, is just a omnibus version of the first 3 Dread Empire books, A Shadow of All Night Falling, October's Baby, and All Darkness Met. These books are weird. Like, I think I'd make like the overall rating like 4 stars, maybe 3.5 stars if I was giving it a star rating. I feel like he was overly ambitious. The first one came out in 1979, and the thing about it is, this was pretty early in his writing career, and he was just swinging for the fences. Like, this world is so huge. There's so much going on, so many bizarre things. I mean, this is epic fantasy turned to 11. I think I mentioned it before in another video. This is like the prototype for something like Malazan. There's so many characters. It is some military fantasy in some places, and then in other places it's epic fantasy, and just, it's really good, but I would not introduce anyone to Glen Cook with these. There's some really weird stuff, and he really goes some places, and well, I enjoyed that. Like, the first book follows a bunch of characters, and eventually when you get into book 2 and 3, you're like, wait, the characters in the first book were barely like there. Like, what? It follows other characters that were in the background in the first book for book 2 and book 3, which is fine. Like, it's cool to see them grow and change. And I mean, this book follows 25 years of these characters' lives, and the book's short. I mean, like, this is 3 novels, and it's only 582 pages. For most people, it's a pretty quick read. The audiobooks are good. Man, there's some really weird stuff. There's some stuff that I would love to spoil, but holy crap, I don't want to do that for anyone. It's really, really bizarre. The magic in it is cool. I will say, in the second book, book, there's a 3/4 of the way through, it starts to drag because of just way too far into the weeds with like military fantasy and like the military stuff that's going on. And it does the same thing in book 3. They both have great payoffs for endings, so they're definitely worth it. And like I said, they're short, so even if it drags for a little while, you'll get to the end pretty quick and you'll enjoy it. In book 3, and I think it might have been the same in book 2, anytime they cover the actual Dread Empire other than like one chapter, it's incredibly boring. I'm glad that most of the Dread Empire books don't even take place in the Dread Empire, because so far I have been like, please, let's just move on. I'll have a Dread Empire chapter and I'll just be like, all right, when is this gonna end? And then the next chapter is just like, boom! And it's just so good. It's so over the top. I absolutely love it. So the series just kind of ebbs and flows, but you ride those waves and it'll be well worth it. That's it for me for the month of December. It was a pretty good month. I think it's like one of the better months for me when it comes to reading, which was surprising because, you know, usually you're busy with the holidays and you don't have time to read. I guess now I can talk about some of my January plans, which are read more Glen Cook. I'm currently reading Hell's Half Acre, which is a history of the sketchy areas in Fort Worth in the late 1800s. It was like right past the train tracks. And that book's been really good so far. It's really cool to read about the history of a place I drive by to go to work. Like I drive over this huge on-ramp and I can look right down to Hell's Half Acre. Well, what was there? It's the Fort Worth Convention Center now. It's really, really good so far. I started Sun Eater. It's real good. I hope you like the new filming location. I'm probably going to film here pretty often. It's nice and quiet. Show off some of my other books. If you want an in-depth review on any of these books, just let me know and I can probably make it happen. Make like a 10-minute video covering one of them. Of course, I'm always open to more recommendations. Leave some comments. If you've read any of these, love to chat about them. I guess with that, I'll see you next time.